Joining us right now in the studio, Lubbock Mayor Pro Tem and Councilman Jim Gerlt. Good morning, Councilman. How are you?
Oh, good morning. Got the wonderful seasonal allergies, but other than that,
me too. What's going on?
I don't know. It happens
What
to
is
me
this
about
stuff?
It happens to me about twice a year.
Yeah.
But
Usually it's towards cotton season for me, so this is a little early.
Well, I've had it in Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas, so it's just it's the cost of being me, I think.
Great.
Yeah, well, and with some of the farmers doing some extra work right now and everything else, I'm sure there's some extra, dirt, dust,
Stuff
and
in
everything
the air.
else getting kicked up out there.
Well, I think it was John Robertson the other night was talking about some of the dust that's coming in is coming from the Sahara.
Really?
Wow.
That some of the winds pick up there, and it hits the jet streams, and it goes around and comes up, and we were actually getting dust not from New Mexico, but from Africa.
That's way cool.
Well, that's bizarre.
How funny. Yeah, I missed that. I'll have to check into that. It's
Well,
interesting.
Yeah, Africa causing all of our sinus problems.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sorry, New Mexico.
I know. We're sorry we blame New Mexico
Yeah, we
for
blame New
everything,
Mexico.
don't we?
Sure. They blame us.
That's
so it's
right.
Only fair.
Yeah, a nice hate relationship or love, or however you want to put it.
Right.
Well, I love it when I see the license plates at the mall.
Well, that's very true.
Yeah. We don't mind it then.
We love New Mexico. Come on down.
That's right.
So, Councilman, last night, more of a shorter meeting in duration, just even looking at the agenda and everything. So I'm sure that was welcome for you all yesterday.
Well, we have a saying in the ministry that there's no such thing as a bad short sermon, and I'm about to decide there's no such thing as a bad city council meeting.
Right. So one thing I noticed, and I realized that with executive session, there are some things that you can talk about and some that you can't specifically. But the purchase power agreement has been something that the council's had to talk about as far as executive session items and then during public agenda items for quite a while here, with the timeline looming on creating a new power plant and everything else. And I guess in either very specific terms or broad terms, what is the latest on the city council and eventually LP&L taking some more action on building a power generation facility?
Well, the latest is we're still in the dark period. We don't have a contract, so we really can't talk about it. I prefer not going to jail.
Yeah. All righty.
We can't talk about it. I will say this. I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing, and I think the citizens of Lubbock are going to be happy when we're finally able. And still, it's anything can still fall apart. Mm-hmm. But what I'm looking at now looks very, very encouraging, and I think the EUB is doing a very good job in what they're doing, and I'm thrilled about it. But that's really all I can tell you.
Okay. Well, and right, obviously I understand that, because of bids and everything else,
Sure.
there's certain items, certain parts of this that can't be discussed and everything like that. But that is right. But that is encouraging to hear that, as far as you're concerned, everything's going on the right track right now and everything else.
I tell you, we have got some great leadership at LP&L. We've made some transitions over there. David McCullough is doing a phenomenal job. Richard Kasner is their attorney. Mm-hmm. Richard's top notch. He's one of the top attorneys they could have hired. So I'm very pleased with him. Andy is doing a super job. Andy Burcham is doing a good job. And then the board. We've got a very, very good board. And the LP&L board, the UB, and the city council are working better together than I can remember the two groups working together ever since they've been organized like this. So it's a very good day for us here in Lubbock.
Well, that's good to hear. One item that caught my eye as far as yesterday, and I know it was approved, but was another set of renovations to the Civic Center. If I remember right, it was about a $2.3 million contract that was approved last night for interior renovations. Was
$2,322,960 roughly.
And how many cents?
We rounded it off. Yeah.
So what will all that entail for this round of renovations and remodels for the Civic Center?
Well, it's going to be flooring. It's going to be walls. There's going to do quite a bit of work in the back in the theater part of it. We're hoping to. Of course, it's going to be a while before the Buddy Holly Performing Arts Center is built. Mm-hmm. The the municipal auditorium is not as workable as we'd like for it to be. It's got some problems. In fact, it's probably one air conditioner away from not being usable at all. Excuse me. So we're really needing to keep the Civic Center, the theater there at Civic Center, working well. So there's going to be some things in the back. If you've ever done anything backstage, if you've ever done anything backstage, it's a little spooky. So we're going to make some improvements there, and we're hoping to continue to attract folks coming here. You know, we're the 7th most popular tourist destination in Texas, and we'd like to move up a notch if we could even. We like to having concerts here. We like having conventions here. And when people look at coming to maybe West Texas and they compare us with some other cities, then we need to have a civic center, a convention center, as it were, that really has an appeal to keep people coming here.
How many seats are in that auditorium?
Yes, there are.
Yes.
I think it's in the neighborhood of 1,200, if I remember right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is a pretty good size theater and everything for, I'm sure, for most needs and for different plays and concerts and so on.
Do you know specifically what would be changing backstage? I'm curious.
I didn't bring my book with me, so I don't have all the backup on it. Okay. But there's a lot of, there's just some things there to make it safer, to make it more user-friendly, make it more performer-friendly. And the public may not see a lot of what goes on back there, but boy, it's kind of like when you look at a swan going across the lake.
Right.
On top, he just looks so calm
graceful
and relaxed and peaceful, and underneath, just swimming away like crazy. And that's kind of what happens at productions that take place from the audience perspective. Everything's just smooth and up front, and backstage is boom, 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 boom.
Right.
So we've got to have it so they can do what needs to be done.
Right.
But the public's going to see some very great cosmetic changes. It's time for an upgrade. Some of the pattern concrete is going to be reworked also. So it's time.
From what I read, it sounded like that some of the walkway and the entrance around the grand staircase was going to be reconfigured a little bit.
Yes.
And then I guess possibly the addition of some more restroom facilities, I think one of them maybe backstage, if I read that correctly, by the theater area, if I remember right.
Well, it's about time to do some renovation on the restrooms, too. Yeah, it's just time for facelift.
And the roof, what's the status on the roof? That was, did we fix that?
We are working to get it fixed.
Okay. Yeah. So that's still a work in progress.
Still a work in progress.
Yeah, and that's not part of this money, though.
No, I think we did that earlier. That's a big old roof.
Yeah.
Good grief, that's a big old roof.
It is.
And we've got a good contractor working on it.
Good.
But sometimes you can only know if your work is finished if you get some rain.
Right.
We've had rain lately, so if there was a little spot they missed on several thousand square feet of space, then they're fixing it.
Right. Lubbock Mayor Pro Tem and City Councilman Jim Gerlt joining us right now on Lubbock's First News on News Talk 790 KFYO, KFYO.com. Rob Snyder filling in today for Tom Collins. Rob Snyder, Laura Mack here with you today on this Friday. Lubbock's First News, News Talk 790 KFYO, KFYO.com. Lubbock Mayor Pro Tem Jim Gerlt joining us today to recap last night's City Council meeting. And Councilman, one last thing on the interior renovations and remodels to the Civic Center. Was there a timeline decided last night as far as when the work will commence and about how long it'll take?
Yes, it's stipulated in the contract that it'll be done in X number of days, and then there's a penalty if they don't meet the deadline. But I'm sorry, I don't remember the timing of it.
Okay. Okay, so this year, possibly early next year or something around there for that. Okay. A great series of events coming up next week. One of the hallmarks of Lubbock, 4th on Broadway.
Woohoo!
Yeah. Always...
But it's not on Broadway.
Well, technically it is. It starts on Broadway.
It does?
We will have the parade.
Okay.
It'll start at Broadway and Avenue A. So it will go a short distance on Broadway and then go into the park.
So about how many thousand people are they estimating for attendance this year?
About 700,000. I don't know. I do know this is the largest free festival in the state of Texas.
That's cool.
Yeah, 100,000 people is not unreasonable to expect.
Yeah. And it is at McKenzie Park. I don't know if we said that, but it's 4th on Broadway at McKenzie Park.
Yes.
So that's the park we're talking about.
Right, with a bunch of different events. Of course, if I remember right, there's still the July 3rd street dance this year. Is that correct?
Street dance is coming up. Which, that's why I brought the brochure. Maybe on the back.
Let's see, is it?
Yeah, there's for the past 2 years.
Yeah. Texas Country Street Dance, Josh Abbott Band, and Sam Riggs. Yeah. And it's $15 in advance or $20 at the gate. Gates open at 7 p.m. on Broadway and Texas.
Right, so that's the night of July 3rd, and then, of course, 4th on Broadway getting underway at about 8, 9 a.m. on July 4th, which, of course, this year
I don't know. This says July 4th for the street dance.
I was thinking the street dance is on
it is on the July 4th.
On the same day,
Oh, okay. Because, in past years, the street dance ended up being, night before and everything else. So I guess that was changed for this year. So
25th anniversary. It's a big deal.
Wow, 25 years?
25 years.
Good grief. How could it be 25 years that we've been doing this?
Times,
I think I remember the first one. That's kind of
well, like the frog said, time's fun when you're having flies.
Right.
Well, we really have outgrown Broadway.
Yeah.
And that's part of the situation. Of course, the North Overton redevelopment has been such a huge deal for us. Mm-hmm. It's so good for downtown. But that's taken away a lot of the parking. So we have people having more and more difficulty finding parking places to attend the 4th on Broadway. So that's why the transition. But we're inviting the folks to come on out to the park and spend the day. Bring your pop-up tent if you want to. Set it up so you can have some shade and enjoy the activities that are taking place.
Yeah, it'll be fun. There's all-day McKenzie Park and Ride being offered and sponsored by Texas Tech. So where do you know where the parking will be, where you could go and do that parking ride thing?
There's $5 parking this year at the South Plains Fairgrounds. So essentially where the fairgrounds are on Avenue A, the parking lot there will have $5 parking. There's also free public parking along 19th Street and Canyon Lake Road. So you'd have a little bit of a walk to McKenzie Park from there, but that's free parking. There's also an additional $5 public parking lot on East Broadway just south of McKenzie Park. And I assume that they'll have like some cones and flags set up and everything else.
I think the last time we attended, we had to park so far away it would have been closer to park at home and walk.
Right.
But that's why the transition, why the move.
So this year's parade route, as Councilman Gerlt said, starts at Broadway and Avenue A and goes east on Broadway to Canyon Lakes Road and then veers around to Cesar Chavez inside McKenzie Park and then ends up at the Marcia Sharp Freeway on the north side of McKenzie Park. So a pretty interesting parade route this year going through the park and everything.
Great parade route. It's going to be so much better, I think, for the citizens. It's going to be a good move.
Continuing our conversation with Lubbock Mayor Pro Tem Jim Gerlt we're happy for him to join us today on the Friday after a Thursday night Lubbock City Council meeting. And, Councilman, a great event as far as an outreach event coming up here for the city of Lubbock, something that's gone on for a number of years, is the city will be hosting another set of junior ambassadors from our sister city in Japan.
Musashi no City in Japan. They'll have 16 teenagers and 4 adults coming to be here. They arrive on July 28th. And they're here until until Monday the 3rd of August. And we have a lot of things scheduled for them. Last summer, we took 16 of our teenagers over there and some of our adults. Boy, it's amazing how the Japanese do a great job of hosting us and very appreciative of us coming. And the mayor of the city, when he greeted us, talked about the importance of getting to know one another so we avoid the hostilities. Of course, they're very much aware of the World War II situation, and I think really working to make sure that nothing like that situation ever sets up again. Mm-hmm. That city actually has 4 partnership cities, sister city relationships. They have one in China. They've got us. They've got 1, maybe 2 in Europe. So they spend quite a bit of money on their partnership cities.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's really, and what an opportunity for the kids.
Yes.
So what do you have planned for them to do while they're here?
Oh, a lot. We're going to expose them to West Texas. They'll go to our museums, the Wind Museum, the Ag Museum, Buddy Holly. We'll expose them to our cuisine. We ate a lot of their fish, uncooked.
Sushi action?
Sushi and sashimi. We ate a lot of that. They'll get a lot of our barbecue, a lot of our Tex-Mex. We'll take them to Lake Allen Henry one day. They'll tour our facilities. They'll see our police academy, our fire academy. they'll understand more how our city operates. They'll have some time at the mall. Want them to spend some of their yen over here, spread the currency around. We're going to have a special call council meeting to recognize them on that Friday morning and make them honorary citizens of Lubbock. The Tech will do a lot with them on one day, expose them to Texas Tech University. Of course, the international community at Texas Tech is just growing like crazy.
It is.
And it's not unreasonable to think that some of these junior ambassadors who are here at the end of this summer or end of July could come back and go to school on master's or doctor's program here at Tech, which I think would be outstanding.
That would be fantastic. Well, it sounds like you've got, they're not going to be bored.
They will not be bored. No, they will not be bored. And I think they're more exposed to our Western cuisine than what our students have been exposed to the Japanese cuisine. Yeah, probably so. Every time the Japanese junior ambassadors come here, they eat everything that's put before them. And I can't say that was true of our ambassadors last summer.
Didn't want to eat that raw fish.
Yeah, they left a lot of raw fish behind. Yeah.
Well, and beforehand, you got to make sure, like on our side, everybody's trained with their chopsticks and everything else. Get that dexterity going in their hand.
Right.
So, as far as restaurants and everything else, I'm sure we'll make sure that they get a good big West Texas steak, right?
Yes, they will. In fact, they're going to be at Las Brisas for one of the meals.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yum.
That's being sponsored by someone. I'm not sure who's sponsoring that. They will also, Longhorn Steakhouse is one of them. I'm looking here through here all the restaurants. Dion's Pizza will be one of them.
Where's the barbecue?
You had to ask that, didn't you?
Well, that's right. We got to make sure they get some barbecue.
I know. They need barbecue. They need Tex-Mex.
Ruby Tequilas is one of the restaurants on here.
Yeah.
I guess we're providing free promo for some of these restaurants.
Yeah, we are, aren't we?
Las Brisas, Rudy's, yo, us now. I'm trying to see the rest of them.
Well, it sounds great.
I know Tech will be providing them lunch one time. They'll be at the Honors College, and I'm sure hopefully they'll get exposed to Red Raider meat, too.
Do they stay with families when they're here, or do they stay in a hotel?
Both. When they first arrive, they'll be at a hotel, and they do things group-wise. And then on Friday, they will go home with families.
Yeah.
Two of them will go stay with the family. That's what our students did last year.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to get the perspective of both the host families and the students who are going. Last summer, our students were nervous. We're going to go to home with Japanese folks. What do we do? What do we say? Yada, yada, yada. Well, at the farewell time last summer in Japan, the families were talking. We were so nervous. What do we do with these students from America? What will they eat? What will they enjoy? So they feel the pressure to provide, gracious hosting for them.
Right.
So that's why it's a really good cultural experience. Those students who went last summer have seen parts of the world that other folks don't get to see. And when you actually live with folks in another culture, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah, my son traveled with an ambassador program to Australia, and they got to stay with a family for several days. And it's really interesting because when you're in that situation, you're kind of out of the tourist zone and into the way people really live. And so it just opens up a whole different aspect to that country and how people live. But how do you get to be a host family for kids in the ambassador program?
You apply.
Yeah.
Right now we've been... and it comes down to a little bit of a challenge sometimes finding enough families to host.
I would love to do that. I think that'd be so interesting.
One of the things we try and do is to have host families who have kids about the same age as the junior ambassadors so that they have something in common. And we do a pretty good job of matching them up. But that makes a greater experience. And then, some of these kids become pen pals, and they've been riding back and forth for a number of years. When we were over there last summer, we had students who were grown adults now in business. I had a dentist, a doctor, that they had been in Lubbock on the Junior Ambassador program. And, of course, a lot of those guys speak English now. But it's so neat to meet them as adults talking about what an impact it had upon them coming to the United States and being able to come to Lubbock, Texas, to home with Buddy Holly, and actually experience our culture. So that's really a good thing.
That's cool.
7:46 right now, Lubbock's First News, Newstalk 790 KFYO, KFYO.com. Continuing our conversation with Lubbock Mayor Pro Tem Jim Gerlt, Rob Snyder, Laura Mack with you here today. In our last 10 minutes here with Lubbock Mayor Pro Tem Jim Gerlt on Lubbock's First News, Rob Snyder, Laura Mack here with you this morning on this Friday, June 26th. Then, Councilman, there was some news with Citibus last night at the City Council meeting.
Always news with Citibus when it comes to funding time. The Community Development Services Board brought their recommendations on the grant money we get from the feds. And there's some restrictions on how the money can be used. One of the issues last night was money for home building going to NELCDC. And there's some concern about, well, why do we want to get it? Well, we couldn't pull that money away from them and give it to Citibus because the federal government requires that it has to be used on affordable housing. So that's part of what comes into play. But the board did not recommend continuing funding Citibus, and that's $150,000. That's going to have to be made up somewhere else. The thing about Citibus is we've got to have it. Unfortunately, it's not as efficient as we'd like because of the number of riders, but it's something we have to have because the people who are riding it depend upon that transportation for work.
That's right.
And so either we subsidize Citibus so people can work, or we have more and more folks making welfare claims because they can't get to work. So it's one of those unfortunate situations that you have. When the thing that hurt us on our funding with Citibus was when we hit 200,000. When you reach a certain population size, then the federal government cuts back on what they will help subsidize on public transit. And of course that happened to us several years ago when we popped the 200,000 population. So we're going to have to find funding somewhere. Route 19 is being suggested as being one possibly cut, but that's the one that probably has the folks that are most dependent upon the rides.
Ouch.
Is it possible that the city could just, quote unquote, find the $150,000 through increased sales tax receipts coming up later this year? Because it seems like over the past year or so, on a year-over-year basis, Lubbock keeps increasing, sales tax revenue from the state due to the amount of business being done here.
you would always hope that would be the case. I think it's narrow-sighted, short-sighted, not wise to try and budget for anticipated sales tax increases because the economy can pivot pretty quickly. Now, fortunately, Lubbock has a very strong economy. We don't have the huge booms like Midland does when the oil thing hits, but we also don't have the huge bust like Midland has when the oil like they're experiencing right now. So we'll just have to see where we can come up with the money. I know people talk about the size of the buses, and so many times they're operating not full. Again, part of that, the buses that we have to use, part of that's determined by the federal government. They set some criteria on what we can use and how long we have to keep them. So it's a lot of people look at us and say, well, you guys are just stupid the way you do things. Well, maybe the things that are being done are stupid, but we're not the ones who are stupid for doing them. We're following the federal law, and that's part of the situation that we come into. We are doing some smaller buses. We finally got to a point where some of the smaller buses now coming in where they'll last the length of time required by the feds to operate, because it's not going to help us any if we get a smaller bus that doesn't meet the criteria, and it doesn't last as long as they say it has to last. And then all of a sudden we got to come up with money to keep the thing running when it costs more to operate than it did to buy a bigger bus in the beginning. So the things that we do, there's always a reason behind them. It may not make sense, but there's a reason behind them.
Right. Rob Snyder, Laura Mack, wrapping up our conversation with Lubbock Mayor Pro Tem Jim Gerlt. And we wanted to remind you about the new parade route again this year for 4th on Broadway. 25th year of 4th on Broadway, as Councilman Gerlt had mentioned earlier this hour. It's starting this year at Broadway and Avenue A, and then it'll go east on East Broadway to Canyon Lakes Drive, and then snake through Mackenzie Park on Cesar Chavez, and then end on the Marcia Sharp Freeway, basically at the north end of Mackenzie Park. So a pretty nice parade route this year, plenty of trees and shade, so I think a lot of people like that too.
And you're invited to bring your own pop-up tents and put them up in the park as well.
Oh, okay.
How fun.
Yeah.
It should be a good day.
Bring your insect repellent. The mosquitoes are bad right now.
Well, our codes department, Vector Squad, has been doing a very good job of spraying.
Good.
But there's just a lot of territory and a lot of mosquitoes to deal with.
And the standing water as well. Don't forget $5 parking for 4th on Broadway this year at the South Plains Fairgrounds. So everything is in one nice, convenient area for this year. Councilman Gerlt, thanks for coming in today.
Always my pleasure.